Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar on the subject of creating a subscription business. Hopefully you're all sat in nice air-conditioned offices to enjoy the next 30 to 45 minutes on this subject. For those of you who don't know who we are, we're a business vision firm of accountants who specialise in growing businesses, help them make more profit and grow cash flow. We've done probably about 150 seminars locally in Plymouth, but we're now doing a range of webinars as well, probably done about a dozen of these. So if you haven't been before, welcome. If you have, it's exactly the same format. And at the end, we'll send you some further information just to follow up on the webinar. If you have got any questions, you are able to do that through the little screen that you get with the webinar, but we won't be answering those during the course of the webinar. We'll come back to them a little bit later. Okay, so we're going to look at something called the automatic customer, which is a phrase that was coined by John Warrilow, who's the author of The Automatic Customer. He's done a couple of books. This is his latest one. The first one he did was basically all about how you sell your business. And one of the specific areas on how you sell your business for maximum value is to have a sort of subscription-based program, which is where the phrase automatic customer comes from. So we're really talking about making money in your sleep, which is obviously the ideal for all of us in business, is not to have to go out there and graft, but to have just money coming in on a regular basis without having to go out and hunt it down. So it's based on that book. I'm only going to touch on some of the things in the book during the course of this afternoon. So I strongly recommend that you follow up by getting the book and all of John's books, to be honest, because some of John's research, or all of John's research, is based in the States, which is where his business is now based. A lot of the examples I'm going to go through today will refer to US businesses and US figures, but they're absolutely applicable to the UK and your business as well. So apologies for it being slightly transatlantic, but it makes no difference to the presentation. Okay, so today we're going to have a look at 4 of the 8 reasons that have been raised as to why all businesses should have a subscription model, either as part of or as the complete business model for them. So John Warrilow's identified 8. I'm going to go through 4 of those today, just to give you a reason why you need to look at it, because it is a very, very good process to get involved with, and we'll explain why. And then we're going to look at, of the 9 different ways of creating a subscription model that John's recognised, I'm going to go into some detail about 3 of those just to give you a flavour of what might be possible. But it does mean that as we're going through, you might think, well, those 3 models don't apply to my business. I can guarantee that every business is possible to create a subscription model. So if yours doesn't fit easily into those 3, there's a good chance that it fits into the remaining 6 that I won't have time to go through. But I'll give you the opportunity at the end to discuss some of those areas and find out what's the perfect fit for your business. But at least it will give you a flavour of what other people are doing and how they're doing it. Okay, so first reason we're going to look at why you want a subscription model is basically your business value. So what John's research showed, he's got a program that we have access to, which I'll talk to you about later, called the Business Valuer process. And what that does is it scores businesses who complete a quick 20-minute questionnaire on how sellable their business is. So basically, businesses come along, complete the questionnaire, and they get a score based on the answers to those questions. Now, what John's basically found is that there's a direct link between the level of that score and the value of the businesses that want to sell. And usually when you sell a business, the most typical way that the business will sell is by the buyer offering a multiple of profits. So typically what you do is you'd work out your average profits over the last 3 or 4 years, and then the buyer will offer you 3-4 times that figure. For small businesses, you could argue that it's somewhere between 3 and 5, but what John's found is that basically the average is 3.76. So of all the people who actually went through this process, the average multiple they got was 3.76. But if you look at how that breaks down with the sellability score, which is out of 100, if those businesses scored less than 50, then they were typically only getting 2.76 times their profit. So that's about a third off the average. But those who scored a 50 to 60 score, they got about 3.6, which is pretty much where the average is, so they were doing okay. But the score John recommends is at least above 60 and ideally above 80. So if we just go through the figures for those, if they scored 60 to 70, they're getting over 4 times profits, so they're now above the average results. They get 70 to 80, they're getting 5 times, so they're now approaching 50% higher than the average for the value of their business on sale. And if they manage to get a score of 80 plus, then they're getting 6.27 multiple times profits. That's over 6 years worth of their normal profits paid when they sell the business, which is nearly double the average. So it's clearly worthwhile having a good score, and part of that score, and only part of it, is based on the principles we're talking today. There are about 8 principles in the program, and one of the key principles is that of a subscription-based business and automatic customer, but there are obviously 7 other principles that we may well talk about in future webinars, and you can get your score for your business at the end of today's session. I'll show you how to actually go online and get that and get a report that will tell you both your score and an approximation of your business's value. So hopefully from that you can see that if you follow these principles, then the value of your business is going to escalate dramatically, and clearly that's going to be a huge benefit on business sale day. Okay, let's take another look at business valuation. Let's just look at security industry as an example. So this is basically a business that fits alarms either in homes or in business premises, and they'll come in and fit the alarms, the intruder alarms, and maybe fire alarms, etc. Now, there's 2 types of income that would come into that type of business. The first type is what we call installation. So effectively what they do is they come in, they have some members of their team fit the various alarms, so they'll come in and do work within your building, fit it, check it, make sure it all works, and that comes with a one-off fixed cost that you then pay them to get that installed. Now if you look at a security company where the turnover is, let's say, 500,000, then the valuation on that would be around 750,000. And the problem with installation work is clearly that they're only going to do that usually once per customer, or at least in the short term once per customer until they move premises. So every time they do the work, in order to keep improving profit, they've got to go out and find new customers where they'll do a further installation and a further one-off bill. So that's the valuation on the screen there of a business that does security but only does the installation. If we now look at the alternative, which is basically a business does only the monitoring, which is the next stage usually. Once it's installed, they'll then charge you for a monitoring process that might involve checking the equipment works, because obviously no point having it there if it's not going to detect burglars and fires. But they'll also possibly have an on-call service, so if the alarm does go off in the middle of the night at business premises, then somebody will be coming round to fix it, or will be available on the end of a phone call to sort it out, especially if it's a false alarm. So that's a monitoring program, and the way they bill for that is an amount per month. So you basically pay a fixed amount per month, which is the automatic customer, the subscription model that we're talking about today. Well, the same turnover for that business would make that business worth 2 million. And it's clear to see why that would be the case. Is a buyer is effectively getting, with a monitoring business, a set of customers all paying a monthly fee, and unless they get upset because the company does something wrong or annoys them, then they're typically going to stay for a fairly long period of time paying their monthly direct debit and payment. And that's valuable because a person buying that business doesn't really need to go out and do an awful lot other than keep them happy and do the monitoring work when required. Whereas if they buy the installation business, whilst it might have a long history of making good profits, they've still got to go out and find more customers from different places that weren't the ones that the old business had found. So a lot tougher and a lot harder. And typically you'll find that businesses with all automatic subscription will be worth about 2, maybe more times the business that has to just go out and get one-off transactions. And that applies industry-wide. Security business is a good example because we're all familiar with it, but you will find that most businesses that go from 100% one-off transactions to 100% regular income stream will be worth around double, slightly more than double. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an incentive that what we're going to talk about is worthwhile. Second reason is the lifetime value. Now, lifetime value basically says what's a customer worth, not just on a particular invoice or during a particular year, but during the whole lifetime value of that business. So we just take another example, which is a florist. So you've basically got a flower shop, and the problem with that is a flower shop is going to have business premises. By definition, they need people to walk past and be fairly near high streets, etc. They're going to have fancy stores to run them from, so the running costs are high. And the main problem is going to be that typically they're hoping that a man will notice ahead of time that they've got a wedding anniversary or something looming, and this might be an easy way of commemorating that by visiting the florist or ringing them up and paying £30 or so for a transaction. But it's very much like the installation in the security business. It's all about one-off transactions, and you have to keep going out and keep finding those customers or hope that they keep finding you. So let's just look at an alternative way, the automatic customer way to run a flower business. So H Bloom, which is a business based in the States, but it's completely doable from a florist in the UK. And what they've got is a fifth of their businesses are actually on an automatic subscription model. So they will work with corporate customers, people like restaurants, spas, hotels, to subscribe to a regular weekly or so delivery of fresh flowers. So they need fresh flowers. They don't want to be ringing up every week to order them. They want to know that they're going to be good and fresh and delivered on a regular basis so they don't have to worry about it. And that's obviously an automatic subscription model. Well, if you can compare that from a $29 sale, this company is basically making $29 every week for 52 weeks a year, and typically they're just 3 years. So the lifetime value of the corporate customer there is $4,524 compared to just maybe $29 for a one-off purchase by somebody for a wedding anniversary. And that business is run by a guy called Sonyu Panda, and very, very successful in the States. So if you can imagine how valuable that business is on selling, but also about how much more profit and how easier it is for that business to run, not just because of the automatic model, but also think about how florists work, is they have very, very busy peak times and a lot of the year when not a lot happens. So Easter, Mother's Day, times like that, Valentine's Day, are going to be peak periods. So they're having to buy in loads of stock for a huge amount of customers, and then the rest of the year it all falls slightly flat. So not ideal in terms of hiring staff, not ideal in terms of buying stock, not ideal in terms of cash flow. Whereas a corporate model, a monthly subscription model, income just comes in on a regular basis and the flowers go out every week. So again, lifetime value, a huge benefit for automatic customers. Third reason is almost in every single case where a business has its business as a subscription model, or in a business where part of it has been converted into a subscription model, they will sell a lot more sales. So we'll give you some examples a bit later, one of which is Amazon Prime, where subscribers tend to buy more stuff because of various reasons, but it's a bit like a club, and they're obviously paying on a regular basis, so they're going to be more involved on a regular basis as well. So research shows that a subscription model, subscribers are going to buy a lot more stuff from that business, and extra sales is obviously what we all want. The final reason I'm going to go through today, as I say, although there are 8, is that you're going to get paid automatically. If you've got a subscription model, you might as well arrange for payments to be made by direct debit. Almost every subscription model we come across work on that method, and these days getting paid by direct debit is dead easy. There are businesses out there that will work with bookkeeping software like Xero, for example, where you can set up monthly direct debits with a minimal cost and without having to go through your banks, where they'll often refuse direct debit service because you're a small business. So you've now got no problems getting paid because you're sending out automatic invoices, but the direct debits are flowing in every month. Often these people may be paying a direct debit and not even getting anything because they've bought the right for something but then forget to go and get it. For example, I subscribe to Audible, which is an annual subscription for audio books, and I use that mainly for business books to listen to in the car, etc. Well, I haven't looked at that for some time, but I still carry on paying the annual subscription, and I noticed today that I've actually got about 6 audio downloads I can make because I haven't picked up any recently. So again, Audible don't mind about that particularly because I'm still paying my subscription whether or not I download those audio books. So you'll often find money comes in and you're not even supplying what you've been asked to supply because they're not doing something their end. Not that that's the main reason, but there can often be no work. You send out the invoice and you get paid by direct debit automatically every time. Well, if you compare that with, let's say, the security company installation only, you've got to do the work first, so that's going to take some time. Then you've got to create and send the invoice out, and then 30 days or 60 days later, maybe you get paid. Maybe they are going to be a bad debt. So no bad debts, quick payment, and again, cash flow wise, there's no peaks and troughs. The only time your monthly income is going to change is when you basically add or lose subscribers to the monthly subscription. So fourth method there is just a very easy way of getting paid and an easy flow of cash flow, which obviously also has enormous benefits in loads of areas, not least of which is your borrowings. Okay, so we've looked at some reasons which hopefully will make it clear that this is something you've got to look at for your business. So we're just going to look at a few models that have been identified. You could basically argue that there are dozens of different models, but John Warrillow's made it easy to go through it and come up with broadly 9 categories. And we're going to look at 3 of those. Hopefully some of these will apply to your business or can be done in your business. There's no reason why you would only opt for one. It's possible that you might be able to run 2 or 3 in your business, but if you don't spot one that's dead easy for you in the 3 we're going to run through, as I said, there are 6 others, so we can set up a chat where we'll run through those and see whether they might be more suitable. But you'll get a flavour. So first one is called the simplifier model, and this basically just says that as human beings we quite like the idea of setting something in place and then being able to forget about it. the flower one we mentioned is such an example where you basically set up the direct debit, you ask for fresh flowers and they get delivered. You don't need to make arrangements. You don't need to ring up every week. Another example is the Mosquito Squad. Again, this is going to be less relevant to the UK, but the process is certainly relevant. A lot of countries around the world have problems with mosquitoes. Certainly places in the United States have a problem. And Mosquito Squad know that the problem with people who just basically wait for something to happen and then ask for it to be fixed aren't going to get the best deal, partly because they tend to be situations that crop up for most people at a similar time. So it means if you ring up and say, oh, I've got a mosquito problem in the backyard, then basically there will be loads of other people with a similar problem in a similar area. So they're going to be very busy and they might not be able to come out too quickly. And the other problem with mosquitoes particularly is by the time you've noticed them and get somebody in to sort it out, it's by and large a bit late to sort the problem out. They've already been there, they're already hatching eggs and so on. So it's really damage limitation rather than getting rid of the problem completely. The best way of getting rid of the problem, which Mosquito Squad have identified, is that they basically need to be out there doing something on a regular basis as a preventative measure rather than after the event. So they've got an automatic program where, again, you pay, set the direct debit in place and forget, and they will come out on a regular basis and do what they need to do from a preventive point of view so that you actually never see a mosquito. And that's a very good subscription-based model. And with their business, they have a 72% renewal rate. So people who pay that for a year, over 70%, nearly 3/4 of them come back the next year to get exactly the same treatment again. So it's in advance, but it's regular and it's effective rather than after the event, not so effective, and also difficult to get hold of the people to do it because they're doing it at the same time everybody else wants it done as well. So that's one model. Next model is the front of the line subscription model. Now, I can guarantee that you probably come across this model in various places, even if you can't operate it from your own business. And the fact is that we've become a nation of queue jumpers because time's so precious these days, despite the fact that 20, 25 years ago, the whole modern computer-based generation was going to leave us as a leisure society where we had very little to do, and therefore leisure activities would be the theme of the day. The reality is, in business and in private lives, we're busier than ever. So in order to save a bit of time, and because we probably become a little bit more impatient as things become quicker and more readily available, videos, films in the cinema are now available within months of them appearing. Everything we need is available immediately almost. You can order food and have it delivered to your house. The whole process has become quicker. So as a result, we've become more impatient and many of us want to jump the queue. Now, unfortunately, the ones with the money are able to jump the queue by paying in many cases. So although your mother might have taught you to wait your turn, increasingly we're not prepared to do that. We want to get to the front of the line. Now, a couple of examples of how that would work, although there are many others, is Disney. If anybody's been to Disneyland, they now operate, as many adventure parks do, a fast pass. And what that does, although it can be slightly contentious, is you pay a bit of extra money as a subscription, and they effectively push you to the front of the queues that can be quite large and full of people who haven't paid for this extra automatic subscription. So you're paying to jump the queue. Another example would be the Eden Project down in Cornwall, where you can basically pay an annual subscription, and as a result of that, what the Eden Project will do is email you details of the Eden music sessions that they hold down there every evening during the summer. I think they usually have about 4 or 5 different sessions with top line acts, and they're usually going to sell out, and it may be hard to get the tickets. So if you pay this annual payment to Eden Project, they will email you a couple of weeks ahead of normal marketing and advertising that these are the acts and you can buy your tickets ahead. So you're basically paying to be guaranteed tickets because you're pushing yourself to the front of the queue. So that's a front of line subscription. Another example, which is a US company, is a business called ThriveWorks, which I don't think has made its way over here, possibly for obvious reasons once you find out what they do. But they're a counselling company in America, a very big one, run by a guy called Dr. Anthony Sent. And what he was finding in America is that there was quite a large requirement for counselling. They seem to do a lot more of that over there. And the problem is that because of the lack of qualified counsellors, people had a long queue to wait. So they decided that they need counselling, but often it can be 20, 30, 60 days before they can get in front of a counsellor. And obviously in those sort of circumstances, that may well be too late for some people, or certainly not ideal. So he set up a subscription business where I think last time I looked, it was $99 a year. You pay a subscription to jump the queue. So if you've paid that subscription, if you do need counselling, they guarantee that you will be put in front of a counsellor within 24 hours. So effectively, you're jumping the queue again about all those other people who are waiting 30, 60 days. Now, it doesn't mean that that subscription means you don't pay the counsellor. You still pay the same money for the counselling sessions, so the cost of that remains the same, but they're getting an extra $99 from each of those people who are prepared to pay money to jump the queue. And at the moment, that business, 20% of its income comes from that $99 subscription. So it's not obviously the whole model. A lot of income comes from people paying the counsellor sessions as a fee for each session, but a fifth of that business is purely money coming from a $99 automatic subscription. So if you can think what the costs are for that, nothing. Apart from running the admin of the subscription and maybe a little bit of marketing to make people aware of it, that's a fifth of the business coming in that they wouldn't normally have had as pure profit. And they're still going to get all the normal fees from the same number of people. It's just that some of those people will have jumped the queue over others. So again, that's a jump to the front of the queue type model, which again can often be done. People will usually pay money to get preferential treatment, to be there first, to be first in line. It may only be the people with the money, but again, that's part of the process, unfortunately. And the third of the models that we're going to look at out of the 9, which is again probably going to be, I would have thought, a more common one, is called the consumable model. And this effectively says where people want to buy something that's going to run out, you give them a monthly subscription so they don't have to keep having to remember to go and get the product. So a good example would be, nappies. It means you have that never again thing where you go, oh, we've run out of nappies, so we suddenly have to break up our normal day-to-day processes, rush down to a shop that's open late, get nappies for the babies. Whereas what you can do is have a subscription model where those nappies, or a required amount of nappies, presumably based on how many babies you have, will be delivered to your door for a monthly subscription. So it's something that might run out, but it saves the person who wants that to actually get to the point where they run out with all the problems that incurs, and then having to disrupt their day-to-day life to do something out of the ordinary to get that replenished. Examples are Staples, who sell toner cartridge on subscription model, printer cartridges. It's anything that might run out. Typically things that don't offer a huge amount of enjoyment. So another example which we'll come on to is razor blades. We'll have a look at a company in a minute that does that. Amazon do it. We'll have a look at that as well. There is a company called diapers.com in the States, and I'm sure there's probably similar ones setting up over here. So look at a couple of those. Amazon do this. We might not think necessarily of Amazon as an automatic subscription model, because we just go onto Amazon and we buy books, we buy videos or whatever, and that's a one-off transaction. But of course, Amazon have something called Amazon Prime, which is a subscription. So that's their subscription-based model, which is obviously not the whole business, but it is quite a big part of it, probably bigger than most people realize. And that says you get certain benefits, which might be occasional freebies, etc., by paying an annual subscription. And they very much want all their customers to be Prime customers as well. So we look at a couple of examples of what they're doing. The average Amazon customer will typically spend, this is figures from the States, but I'm sure they're no different in the UK particularly. In the States, the research shows that an average Amazon customer will spend $625 a year, whereas an average Amazon Prime subscriber will spend $1,500. Now that's obviously on top of the subscription price to join Amazon Prime. So it may well be that that's partly because people who join Prime are going to be the biggest spenders, but the reality is, as we mentioned at the beginning for the reasons, once people are in, they're going to take more advantage of what they're offered. So if you're offering, let's say, a 10% discount, a huge benefit for a subscriber, so you join the club, pay an annual subscription, once you get that perk and that benefit, it's more likely you can go back and visit and get your money's worth by getting the discount or whatever it is that you're offering. So if it's, tickets up front or whatever, you're going to be more likely to go. With the Eden Project, for example, the people who've paid for that subscription, having paid the money, and I don't think it's a huge figure, I think it's about 30, 40 quid per year, if they then get emails telling them who the advance notice acts are, even if they're ones they might not normally go and see, because they've joined that club, if you like, they're probably going to think, well, yes, I ought to see at least one of them to get the money's worth. So there's going to be more sales, both in terms of the subscription price and the fact that they're going to spend more with that business as well. So Amazon, as I say, 2.5 times more money coming in from Prime customers than non-Prime customers. Mentioned razor blades are consumable. Obviously, generally, razor blades will expire after a certain period of time. And I can only speak from the male point of view, but clearly having razor blades that are blunt and a bit past their sell-by date is not great. It's not going to be an enjoyable shave. It's going to leave, slight rash marks, etc. So not a great thing. Why do we have shaving that is with out-of-date blades? Well, because we're either lazy or forgetful, and we don't buy them exactly when we need them. We only remember we need them when we suddenly realise that it's not a particularly enjoyable shave. So automatic subscriptions have cropped up to deal with that, because we don't want to have to worry about getting razor blades exactly when we need them. It's a bit of hassle. It's not a great enjoyable factor buying razor blades. So a company in the States, again, called the Dollar Shave Club has cropped up, which basically says they're going to deliver razor blades to you. Depends how many you want and how often you want them. But there's a screenshot of part of their website there where you've got different types of razor blades. So that goes back to the sort of pricing model, which is a separate subject, but good, better, best. So they've got 3 choices there depending on how big your wallet is. But the fact is that those are going to get delivered to you without fail every month, come rain or shine, because you're paying a subscription model. So you might not need them every month. You might only run out every 5 weeks. So it's going to force you to sort of have to buy them more regularly. So certainly people are going to spend more on those razor blades because they're going to get 12 a year, whereas if they wait for it to be, blunt and slightly rusty, it probably would be a razor blade every 6 weeks. So it's accelerating the frequency of purchase, but it's also obviously getting a subscription model, which means they're going to get a huge number of people who are shavers in their club and take that business away from supermarkets or wherever you go when you realise that your razor blades need replacing. So a great way of getting consumables, and that is probably going to be one of the biggest areas we're going to see growth in over the next 5 to 10 years, is those type of things being specialised and niche and offered through door-to-door delivery. So that's the Dollar Shave Company. That's a South Korean company called Dorco running that. And what they do is they actually buy their razor blades from South Korea, I think it is, very, very cheaply. But clearly they don't mention that, because if you knew that, you'd go out and buy even cheaper razor blades direct from those via Amazon or so on. So this is a niche presented business for razor blades, but there are all number of consumables that people need on a regular basis that can be replaced. There can be subscription models for veg and fruit being delivered, organic veg and fruit being delivered, meat, seen adverts for prime steaks being delivered on a monthly basis, probably more than we typically eat, but the fact that we think they're great saves us having to find great steaks and meat when we go into the supermarkets, and we know we're going to get them on a regular basis. So that's become quite popular. Wine, there are wine clubs out there that deliver bottles of wine or crates of wine, every so often, every month or every 2 months. Not only does that mean that they've got an automatic subscription model, but it typically means that you tend to drink a bit more than you should, because you've got a great big crate in front of you and another one's going to be coming in a month's time. So, question to ask for that particular model is, what do your customers run out of? What do they need as a consumable that you might be able to supply on that basis? And that's because people are generally overloaded time-wise, they're over-programmed, and if you can just do something that saves them having to remember, it just arrives through the door, job done. Okay, so that's the last of the 3 models. Hopefully they will give you a flavour of what the models can do, but as I say, there are 6 other different types of models that you may well be familiar with out there in the business community, and they may have a better application to your business than the ones we've looked through. But I think the 3 we've talked about are probably the most common ones and the most likely to be applicable to small businesses. Before we sort of close down on that, just run through a little bit of quick maths. What John Morello has come up with is a very, very concrete and researched method of working out how sellable a business is based on its automatic subscription model. I'm not going to go through it in great detail because it is quite complicated and easier probably to explain face-to-face than it would do over a webinar where you can't easily ask questions, but it's going to give you a flavour of it. So he's basically got a number of figures that he's worked out form part of a calculation that gives him a figure where he can say, well, if that figure's below this, you're probably not going to be sold. If it's above that, then you probably will, and the more above it is, the more likely it is to sell and the more you're going to get for the business. Now, to be fair, John Morello works with big mergers and acquisitions more than the sort of businesses the size of us and the people listening today, but it's still the same process and application. So rather than go through the whole formula and get you to work it out just yet, I'm just going to go through what those figures are so that you can start to think about measuring those figures. And if you're interested, we can show you how to apply those figures to get a score and see how that ties in with John's research. So the key figures are the acquisition cost. So what that basically says, and this only relates to the subscription model part of your business if you've got more than just the subscription part. So it says what's it's costing you per customer to get them on board to the subscription model. So that's typically going to be only advertising and marketing, maybe a little bit of labour depending on what the subscription model is, but it's typically going to be internet-based advertising, marketing, etc. Possibly telesales, but it's all acquisition cost. So what's the cost per customer to acquire them, to get them into the routine of a subscription model? Second measurement is what's the recurring sales per month or per year? So how much sales do you get from this particular subscription model over a month or over a year? That's obviously important. The next measurement is client retention. And what he means by that is the alternative way of looking at it would be what they call churn rate. So it's how many people actually dip out of the subscription model, cancel the direct debit or unsubscribe or whatever. So how many people drop out? The reverse of that calculation is client retention. So over a year or over a month, how many do you lose? So how many do you keep? So if 2% drop out per month, it means monthly you've got 98% client retention. So that figure needs to be measured, and it's obviously easy to measure with the subscription model business compared to an installation type business, where just because somebody's had burglar alarms fitted doesn't mean they're not still a customer. It means they've got no need until it runs out or they move premises. Whereas with a subscription model, if they're paying annually or they're paying monthly, you know when they cease to be a customer because that monthly or annual payment doesn't come in. So that's the client retention rate. So the question to ask there, if you're going into a subscription-based model, or you already are, is you want to be looking at making sure that your retention figure's high. Now, the most common time for people to drop out is usually in the first 3 months. So they like the idea, but they join, and the reality is not what they were expecting. So if you can get them past the first 90 days, they're typically going to be in it for a long haul, until they stop growing beards and don't need razor blades, or until babies grow up and they don't need nappies. They're going to be a customer, but in the first 90 days, they're at high risk. So the question there is to improve retention rate. What does your business do during the first 90 days to completely wow and dazzle somebody and make it look exactly like they were expecting, and provide a program that completely bowls them over? They've got no choice but to continue to sign up. If it's disappointing or the products aren't quite what they thought, then there's going to be a high dropout rate, which actually isn't going to help. That just means you're paying a lot of money acquiring people simply for them to drop through and out of the business a few months later. So that's the third measurement, is retention rate. And the last measurement is the margins. That basically says, out of the sales you're getting, what are you left with after paying for whatever it is you're supplying? So in the case of nappies or razor blades, it's obviously the monthly payment less the cost of supplying the monthly products. So that's the margin, usually expressed as a percentage. So if you know those four figures, typically what you're looking for is the acquisition cost to be as low as possible, the recurring sales to be as high as possible, the client retention to be as high as possible, and the margin to be as high as possible. But if you've got those four figures, not going to do it today, but we have got a formula from John Morello that will allow you to work out a score, which they have given a name, and that then says they know once it's above a certain point, then you've got a good sellable business. And they apply that to big stock exchange companies where they may think they've got a sellable business, but they do the calculations and they say, no, people aren't going to buy your subscription model because it doesn't stack up number-wise. So if you get those numbers and you want me to go into more detail, be happy to do that. But at least make sure you're measuring those things if you do a subscription model. So that's, I say, a bit of maths, sort of follow up on the subscription model. So I hope you found that it's not going to be a thorough interrogation of the subscription model process, but it's certainly going to be dipping your toes into the understanding of it. And at the very least, I hope it's given you some sort of encouragement that that's the way to be looking at growing businesses, growing valuable businesses, and maybe a better way of making profit than the traditional way we might be using already. So hope you found that useful. If we just click on to some action plan bits and pieces to follow up from today. We obviously, as I said before, do frequent webinars and seminars. So these are the next couple of dates to put in your diary. 15th of September is another webinar, and that's on the subject of windows of opportunity, which will probably mean absolutely nothing. But that's basically looking at how to get more money out of your existing customers. It's a specific process called the windows of opportunity, underused in my experience in almost every business we come across. And it's a lot easier to get money from your existing clients because they already know you. Hopefully they already like you. So it's exploiting that area rather than to have a go hunting for new customers. So that's a webinar in a couple of months' time. And as always, it will be this time of day, but we aim to hopefully record them as well and put them on our YouTube site. And then a live seminar, which is run in Plymouth on the 20th of October 2016, which is about productivity and some ideas on how to double or treble productivity. Increasingly, businesses are getting busier, people are getting busier, but actually achieving less. So we're running around a bit like headless chickens more and more, and people are complaining that they're working 60, 70-hour weeks and actually earning less money, which doesn't make any sense. So we're going to address that particular issue in October live in the seminar. So if you haven't been to those before, they're free, and you're welcome to come along, bring somebody else from your organisation or another business colleague. Happy to come along, and you'll get invites for those nearer the date. And finally, just a couple of things you can do to do with what we've been talking about, and I'll leave this on the screen so you can jot them down. We are able to do a free business valuation report based on the John Warrilow models, so we can basically give you that 20-minute questionnaire, and then shortly after we get that back, we'll be able to send you a detailed 26-page report that highlights 8 areas of a business for it to be successful, and it will give you a score in each area, an overall score out of 100, and also a reasonably accurate business valuation to work with. And following that, we can then go through and explain what each of those areas are and how you can improve the scores to get it above hopefully 80, which is the target. So if you want to do that, there is a website where you can click on and just go straight into that. No interaction with me. It will just be fill out the questionnaire, we'll send the report, and if you need any follow-up or chat about that, we'll be happy to provide it. And if you want to go through and expand what we've talked about this afternoon in more detail, talking about your business specifically one-on-one, then we'd be happy to set up a half-day session where we can run through that. Typically, they would normally be £500 plus VAT, but for people who are attending this webinar, we're able to offer that for £250 plus VAT, and that's, as I say, a full half-day meeting to go through and work out exactly which model or models suit your business and exactly how you're going to get that put into place, usually very quickly and usually very profitably. So there's an email address there. If you've got any other email address for our business, it will all do. But if you want to email Wendy at marklawson.co.uk, we can get that set up for you. Or if you just want to basically make an inquiry or find out a little bit more without going to a meeting yet, then you can still email Wendy with any questions. Or, as I say, fill out the valuation report and we'll get that to you as soon as you can. So I'll leave that on the screen for just a little bit of time so you can jot that down. But in the meantime, thank you very much for attending this afternoon. Hope you found it useful and informative. And we look forward to either seeing you or meeting you on webinars in the near future. But for the moment, it's bye from me, Mark Lawson. Thank you.